Combined West continues to fuel the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict by funding the Ukraine regime, by equipping them with arms and ammunition, and by providing them with logistics and intelligence support. Actions of Combined West, led by United States of America and Britain, pose an existential threat to Mother Russia. As a result, the President of the Russian Federation, Mr. Vladimir Putin, and Russian political leadership has called for a partial mobilization of 300,000 men from Russia's military reserves. In this episode of Alternative Perspective, we discuss the significance of this move. We need to first understand what this mobilization is all about. What is actually being mobilized and what is not. Any significant military comprises of three entities: Offensive Corps or Strike Corps, Defensive Corps, and Military Reserves. Offensive Corps or Strike Corps is responsible for offensive operation into enemy territory and wreak havoc. They are extremely well equipped and they possess most of the deadly weapons from the country's arsenal. Generally comprises of mechanized armor divisions or mechanized armor regiments, motorized infantry regiments, special operation groups, supported by artillery guns, rocket launchers, air defense batteries, electronic warfare equipments, airborne assault division, and attack helicopters. Their job is to inflict maximum damage on the opposition. Their training method and training routine is extremely rigorous and rigid. On the other hand, defensive corps are responsible for holding on to the gains made by the Strike Corps or the Offensive Corps. In terms of weaponry, they are not as equipped as the Strike Corps. Generally comprises of light infantry units, some armored divisions, supported by artillery units and rocket launchers. Training routine is not as rigorous as that of the members of the Strike Corps or Offensive Corps. Generally, these units operate within or close to the homeland. Apart from this, significant military forces also have military reserves and substantial military reserves that you would see soon. These are part of the professional army and paid by the government from the public exchequer. These are not random people from the streets. These are professional soldiers. However, their training routine is somewhat flexible. Generally comprises of infantry supported by artillery units and somewhat old and obsolete tanks. They generally work alongside the defensive corps and take part in holding off and mop-up operations. It is not feasible or economically viable, illogical, or simply impractical to have an army with only offensive corps and no reserves. Every single significant army has substantial army reserve. India has close to 1.4 million active personnel and a little more than 1 million reserve. United States of America has close to 1.3 million active personnel and close to 800,000 reserve. Kindly look at the comparison. Western media or propaganda media has been trying hard to give it a different spin to this particular tale of Russian mobilization. They wanted to portray as if Russian administration would pick up random adult healthy men from Russia's streets and throw them into this war. Well, that is not going to happen. Russian military comprises of 1 million active personnel and 2 million reserves. And this 300,000 men would be mobilized from this pool of 2 million reserves. Western propaganda media is peddling a fake news in order to create a chaos and pandemonium within Russia with an aim to prop up an uprising against Mr. Vladimir Putin's political establishment. Because West knows that is the only way in which Russia can be defeated. Currently, Russia has employed 200,000 men, mostly from its defensive corps, in its military operation in Ukraine. Russia mostly hasn't used its offensive corps for operations in Ukraine except for some special forces units and airborne assault divisions. Offensive corps are kept for any further eventuality, for example, NATO adventurism. Now, out of this 200,000 men, 60,000 men are only carrying out the offensive duties in Ukraine and rest 140,000 men are holding the defensive formations. These 300,000 men who are now being mobilized would take up the positions of this 140,000 men and secure the defensive formations. That is, this 300,000 men would release 140,000 men from the defensive duties and these men would then join their fellow comrades up front in the offensive duties. So Russia is going to heighten the intensity of offensive operations in Ukraine with 200,000 men. And these 300,000 men who are now being mobilized would secure the defensive formations. So that is the plan. This would be a tough, long winter for the Ukrainians, and Russia was just waiting for this moment, that is, the onset of winter, to deliver this knockout punch or knockout blow. Scott Ritter is a former United States Marine Corps intelligence officer, and he has served as the United Nations Weapons Inspector. He is a critic of American foreign policy. This is well explained by Mr. Scott Ritter. Kindly watch.
What Putin just did this week was unexpected. That Putin basically took us by surprise. The partial mobilization came as a shock, combined with the referendum. You see, one of the things about the Kharkov offensive and the whole Kherson offensive was designed to disrupt the notion of a referendum. And in the aftermath, Russia, it looked like Russia was confused. They were saying, well, we're going to cancel these referendum they were holding. We're going to move them off to November. Then we're canceling them indefinitely. And if you were in the White House, you're saying, this is working. This is working. What we're doing is working. We are literally throwing them off balance. But no, all we did is wake them up. And now, by holding this mobilization combined with a referendum, see, the mobilization is going to free up 200,000 combat troops who otherwise were not engaged in combat. And Russia's going to have a large, focused, offensive-oriented military that's going to bring together all the power that Russian doctrine brings, and that's that. But it's also going to be in defense of the motherland, and this is the game changer, because now Russia's no longer involved in a special military operation. Russia's involved in defending the motherland, which brings nuclear weapons very much into the equation.